As extensive blue and green screening on set has gone on the rise, it feels like something is being lost in a lot of today's big-budget films. In the past, especially in the world of science fiction, if filmmakers wanted to put you in a world that doesn't exist, they literally had to build it from the ground up. As a result, those worlds, constructed of miniatures, matte paintings, and elaborate sets, have stayed believable decades after their release, holding up even under modern 4K scans. Blue screens have existed for a long time, but as digital post techniques have become easier and more advanced, they've slowly begun to swallow up the sets of major productions. Where once completely blue screen sets were a rare outlier, they're now common fixtures in the Hollywood pipeline, which has led to more and more instances where what the characters are doing on screen can feel completely disconnected from everything else around them. And it's not just audiences whose experience suffers, actors are feeling it too.
The task I have in mind will require a great deal.
It was so distressing and off-putting and difficult that I thought, I don't want to make this film if this is what I'm going to have to do.
In 2013, as director Joseph Kosinski set out to make the Tom Cruise blockbuster Oblivion, he and his team were very aware of all of this. So instead of filming their vision of the skies and ruins of a ravaged futuristic Earth on a blue screen stage, they decided to go another way, one that in many ways we're still trying to catch up to. One where even shots like this could be done entirely in camera.
In a science fiction film, there are things you need to depict on screen that can never be built. There is no option except for CGI. But in any other case, I tried to do as much in camera as possible.
From the ground up, Oblivion was planned as a real, physical world that actors could interact with and audiences could actually feel on the screen. Some of this came from the craggy landscapes of Iceland, playing the role of the apocalyptic ruins of America, but it was in the practical and tangible ways the film captured its sci-fi elements where it truly shone. For example, take the Bubbleship, the advanced aerial transport that Cruise's character spends much of the film behind the wheel of. If they were to truly sell the illusion of actually flying this thing, with all its momentum and gravity, they couldn't just place a prop ship in front of a blue screen and call it a day. So instead, Kosinski and team built what was essentially a fully functional cockpit that was equal parts prop as it was high-intensity thrill ride.
It was important to me and to Tom that when we're in the Bubbleship, it feels like we're really flying this thing.
I just thought, oh, man, this is so cool. You know, I'm a pilot. I love stuff like that.
Tom, he had some input on the controls to make sure it felt as realistic as possible with the foot pedals and the control stick. It's able to do things that a normal helicopter or jet are not able to do. So we built a gimbal that was able to spin in all these different axes to provide the motion of the Bubbleship.
Good one, circle that.
Modeled similarly to a flight simulator, this computer-controlled gimbal was able to rapidly rotate a full 360 degrees on command in essentially any direction the crew needed, creating the real effects of centrifugal force and gravity that the actors might go through if they were actually flying, immersing both the audience and actors in the experience.
I think it's important that the actors are able to touch and interact with as much as possible, which is why, we built the Bubbleship as opposed to just having it as a virtual vehicle in the film.
And not only did they build the cockpit, an entire 2-scale model of the vehicle was created. This full-size Bubbleship would join them on set all across Iceland, a feat unto itself given the size and mass of the thing.
How much does it weigh?
The whole ship, about 4,000.
Close to
4,000 pounds.
The landing gear alone is 1,200.
Of course, the ship could have easily been composited in later, saving the production untold thousands of dollars and a lot of extra stress. But having a full craft that could reflect the real light of the landscape around them, and that crews could interact with on camera like a real functional machine, added a level of believability and presence that just wouldn't be there with a digital effect.
I wanted something that is, for an audience, allows you to feel like you're in the ship with Tom. So that big glass bubble was really done so that we could experience what it's like to fly over Earth 70 years from now and feel like you're sitting next to him.
This in-camera mindset even extended to things you normally wouldn't take a second glance at. Andrea Riseborough, who plays Cruise's communications officer, spends much of the film behind this futuristic command desk. While these sorts of digital screens are frequently added in post to simplify things for the cast and crew, Oblivion's production instead decided to make them a physical part of the world, crafting a working table out of huge, high-resolution plasma screens.
graphics get programmed into an interface that can be triggered for playback on set. So the actor can interact with the light table all in camera, rather than like a Minority Report thing or where someone's kind of swiping to invisible screens and then it gets added in post. It's a solution that a lot of modern directors I don't think would even try. They would just automatically want to do it in post. It's a really great kind of elegant and efficient solution to a really serious graphics problem by having everything played back live on these beautiful screens that were all linked together.
But this and the Bubbleship would both pale in comparison to the scale of what they would have to do to create a house built 3,000 feet into the sky without using any digital effects. One of the film's primary locations is the Sky Tower, a massive chrome and glass structure in the clouds that plays a combination home and workplace for crews in Riseborough. Despite most of the film's locations being fairly straightforward to create, if impressive in their own regard, the design of the Sky Tower presented a number of unique and difficult challenges, primarily of which was how to create a sky backdrop that could reach all the way across the massive set while mimicking multiple times of day and weather changes. When creating in-camera backgrounds, films will typically create a large still image backdrop, either as a matte painting or a blown-up high-resolution plate, which, when placed in the background of the set, creates a fairly convincing practical effect. However, for a film like Oblivion that required the constant movement and swirling of the clouds to create a believable effect, something like this would never do. This unfortunately left them with the other default option in the industry, blue screening the entire background and dealing with the effect in post. However, Kaczynski and cinematographer Claudio Miranda found that not only would this betray their commitment to shooting as much as possible in camera, but would create new issues of its own. With so many shiny metal surfaces and panes of glass inside the house that had been integral to the set's production design, they were faced with the reality that if they wanted to use blue screen, all of that was going to have to come out.
If we were to do this blue screen, all that blue that you'd see outside the windows would spill into all these surfaces and all this glass, and that would be a virtual nightmare to have to paint out and deal with in visual effects.
But instead of sacrificing his vision, Kaczynski decided to go a third way, bringing out a technique that he'd been working on finding a way to implement for years that would allow them to create the location in its entirety without any blue screen whatsoever.
Obviously, that's not something you could build, but I felt like we could get close by using kind of a modern take on a technique that Stanley Kubrick used on 2001, which is front projection.
We used a much more high-tech version of it, obviously, but it creates a lighting effect and an immersive quality.
You may have heard of the term rear projection before, which was a common special effects technique in the early years of filmmaking for creating moving backgrounds in studio. It involves, as the name suggests, projecting an image onto the back of a special translucent screen, which can then be played in real time behind the actors. Front projection is similar, but has a lot more in common with the kinds of projection most of us are familiar with, projecting onto the front of an opaque reflective screen instead of from behind. This allows for a brighter and more detailed image with more natural color and contrast, and was therefore ideal for Kubrick's specific needs when filming 2001. Shooting on location in Africa for the film's opening scenes would have been a logistical nightmare, so instead, Kubrick took high-resolution photographic plates of the savannah and projected them onto specially designed, highly reflective screens behind the sets. While simple in concept, this creative solution gave him the seamless final picture he was looking for. However, while Kubrick only needed to cover a flat 100-foot backdrop, Oblivion's Sky Tower set required projecting to a curved screen measuring 5 times that, which would cover a full 270 degrees of perspective across the set.
Before the movie started principal photography, we went to Haleakala, a volcano in Maui. We set up 3 cameras that captured sky, cloud, sunrise, sunsets, stars.
Back home, this raw footage was blended together into a final image with a staggering resolution of 18,288 by 1080. To cover the giant sheet of painted white muslin that would serve as their projection surface, 21 separate HD projectors were brought in, carefully placed underneath the set and connected through a network of 11 media servers that would coordinate the video feeds to allow all the projectors to be controlled simultaneously.
So the overall screen is, it's 42 feet high by 530 feet long. There are 19 different content zones. There's a few variations on sunsets, a blue sky, sunrise that actually, you see everything it's actually got a sun in it. that rises over the horizon.
This not only gave them a beautiful backdrop that could be controlled and manipulated with the click of a mouse, it also gave them a vast natural source of light that could be used to light the entirety of the set without any additional sources.
You end up with an all-in-camera visual effect. You can have things like glass and reflective surfaces. The skies reflect in the eyes of the actors during the scenes. They're surrounded by it. It allows them to immerse themselves more deeply in the story.
And what's amazing, it's all projection, it's all glass, it's all real skin reflections, it's all skin subsurface refractions, it's all that stuff that you get from being in an immersive environment is all on screen.
This technique also had the side effect of combating one of the biggest issues with traditional front and rear projection, which required the camera to either stay still or follow a limited pre-planned path to accurately match the perspective of what's being projected behind them. With the placement of the nearly 24 projectors wrapping the image naturally around the screen, Oblivion's background could be filmed at nearly any angle without any parallax effect or risk of seeing the seams at the edges of the images. They didn't even have to worry about matching the frame rates of the projectors with the camera, as the traditional mechanical shutter of the Sony f/65 cinema camera prevented any flickering or strobing Miranda found when testing cameras with electronic shutters. Surprisingly, the move to ditch the blue screen and film everything in camera also proved to be incredibly budget efficient. In an interview with Joe Kosinski, he reflected that, in the end, not only does it look better than it would have with a blue screen, but it was actually a lot cheaper than having to do all those shots as effect shots. We only have 800 effect shots in this movie, which is half of what most films of this size have. Over a decade later, it's easy to see just how ahead of the curve Oblivion was with their front projection technique. In the meantime, there have been a few movies that have played with it to a more minor extent, but it's largely been eclipsed by its hipper younger brother, filming against LED video panels. The very same year Oblivion was released, 2013's Gravity utilized a primitive version of this tech called the Lightbox, but it wasn't until 2019's Star Wars series, The Mandalorian, that it would truly come into its own, with what they dubbed the Volume. Designed by Industrial Light and Magic, the Volume is a full soundstage whose walls and ceiling are made up of 270 degrees of high-resolution LED panels that could place actors inside detailed 3D rendered environments in real time, and, like with Oblivion's projections, use the light from these 3D environments to help light the scenes themselves. But despite its improvements in convenience and display resolution, it still suffers from problems that Oblivion's production didn't even have to think about, including potential aliasing issues and limits on processing power restricting how much of the screen can be rendered at full resolution at a time, constraining the use of some focal lengths and the speed at which the camera can be moved. This results in productions using it to lean towards smaller, more limited sets, and prevents cinematographers from taking advantage of the kind of wide shots like those in Oblivion that allow for interesting character blocking and show off the scale of the digital background. At the end of the day, though, it's not the technical details that I think made Oblivion's front projection and stubborn commitment to in-camera shooting so effective. It's the passion that it clearly inspired in the cast and crew, which bleeds through into every aspect of the film.
Being able as a designer to participate on a movie where they build real stuff, it's like a designer's dream coming true. It's one thing to have drawings or a computer model. It's another thing to walk up to it.
And the actors really enjoy it too, because they're actually in a place that has clouds surrounding them.
It does help as an actor, not acting green screen. It's interactive, so you don't have to try to imagine something. You're there with the other actors. It felt very organic.
We didn't have to imagine things. It was there. It felt very real.
With more blue screens on set than ever, there's no better time than now for another director with Hollywood's ear and a strong vision to try something like this again, to show why this approach is so effective and special. If not for us, at least do it for the people who work so hard to bring these movies to life. It really does make a difference.
It was the most beautiful set I've ever been on. The most peaceful set to be on. Sometimes, if we did have a break, we'd throw up a sunset or something, and everyone would kind of hang out and watch the sunset. Chill out and watch the sunset.
Yeah,
it was beautiful.